Many bread or pizza recipes look completely different, but they're the same formula in disguise. I'll show you how baker's percentages work, and once you understand this, you'll never need a recipe again. With baker's percentages, the key idea is that flour is always 100% and everything else is relative or a percentage of flour. This includes what people call hydration of the dough, or the amount of water in it. As an example, if you want 4 classic Neapolitan pizzas at 250 grams each and at 62% hydration and 3% salt, this requires 606 grams of flour. This is your 100% flour value and everything else is calculated relative to this. So to calculate your 62% hydration, you take your 100% flour value, which is 606 grams, and you multiply this by 0.62 or 62%. That gives you 376 grams of water. I divided it by 100 here and multiplied by 62, but it's basically the same thing as 62% of 606. And to calculate your 3% salt, again you take your 606 grams, which is your 100%, and multiply it by 0.03 or 3%, which gives you 18 grams of salt. This is how baker's percentages work. Another big factor to consider when looking at baker's percentages is a sourdough starter. If you were to use a sourdough starter in this example instead of commercial yeast, it assumes a 40 gram starter at an equal ratio of flour and water for a room temperature proof over 24 hours at 18 degrees centigrade. The misconception with using a starter is that the flour and water in the starter are supposed to be taken from the total recipe, but it shows here that it's added the flour and water content on. So if you look at the numbers below that say excluding starter, there's actually 20 gram less on the flour and 20 gram less on the water to account for a 40 gram starter at a ratio of 1:1. So it's important to remember if you remove the starter, you have to replace what contained flour and water. So in our example, if we have 40 grams of sourdough starter at a ratio of 1:1, that's 20 grams flour and 20 grams water. So if we remove the sourdough starter from that, and the new quantity of starter is now 0 grams, then we need to add the 20 grams of flour and water back on, which give us the same numbers as what we started with. The sourdough recipe I use is 70% hydration. This is pretty manageable for me to handle, but depending on which flour I use, sometimes I'll reduce the hydration to 65% or so. This makes it much easier to work with, it's less sticky, and it helps with shaping. You can go to really high hydration for certain types of bread and pizza, but be prepared for a challenge if it's the first time you've done that. This is why the baker's percentage is commonly mentioned when you hear people talking about hydration. If you want to make a recipe bigger, but you're not sure how to work out the numbers, this is where baker percentages become useful. Let's say you wanted to scale the earlier recipe up to 7 pizzas. The 4 pizza recipe calls for 606 grams of flour at 62% hydration. If you're to multiply 606 grams by 1.75, this will give you a flour weight of 1060 grams. This is your new 100% flour. If you want 62% hydration, then 62% of 1060 grams is now 657 grams for your hydration or water content. The problem with multiplying here is that if you need a scalable number that isn't that easy to calculate, you can make a mistake. For example, if you want 17 pizzas. An easier way to calculate this is to work out the flour weight in each dough ball. So if you take 606 grams and divide that by 4, this gives you 151.5 grams of flour per dough ball. And if you take that number and multiply it by 17, we get 2,575 grams. This is a new 100% flour. Same as before, we can then multiply 2575 by 0.62 for 62% hydration, and also 2575 by 0.03 to get our new water and salt quantities. There's much less room for error doing it this way. If you want to scale down the recipe, this just works in reverse. If you wanted 3 dough balls, first take away 151 grams from 606 grams. From here you can then multiply again by 0.62 and 0.03 to give you the water and salt. If you wanted to use a specific quantity of flour, for example to maximise a mixer capacity, or have a bunch of flour you have to use before it expires, you can take a recipe or initial quantity shown above, calculate the flour in 1 dough ball, and then divide the total flour you have by the 1 dough ball flour quantity. From here, once again, you can multiply this by 0.62 and 0.03 to quickly get your water and salt quantities. For example, 5 kilograms of flour divided by 151.5 grams per dough ball makes 33 dough balls. And water again is your 5 kilograms of flour as your 100%, multiplied by 0.62, which is 3.1 kilograms of water. And salt is 5 kilograms times 0.03, which is 150 grams of salt. Once you understand these simple numbers, you're no longer tied to specific recipes. You can scale anything up or down and still get the same result every single time. The only other thing that I want to mention here is that if you were to add extra water or flour throughout the process, which is sometimes encouraged, this can change the hydration of the dough and can affect the final product. Just one to remember. In my next video that I'll link here, I use the pizza app to calculate dough recipes, timings and temperatures for good Neapolitan pizza. I hope you find this video useful and hopefully it will help you in future. Let me know if you have any feedback on this video and please subscribe to our channel for more content.